The door opened creakily, and the Archbishop greeted the vast congregation.
May the peace of God our Father be upon this house and upon all this company.
Then his procession, including his local bishops of Kent, moved towards the chair of St. Augustine, to whom Dr. Runcie is the 102nd successor. Cardinal Hume of Westminster was there, the first time a Roman Catholic has been allowed to take part in an enthronement ceremony at Canterbury since the Reformation.
From the Epistle of St. Paul the Apostle.
The Archbishop was first enthroned as Bishop of the See of Canterbury. Only then could he be made Primate of all England. He was installed by the Dean of Canterbury.
I, Victor de Vannes, Dean of Canterbury, by the authority committed unto me, install you, most reverend Father in God, Robert, by divine providence, Archbishop of Canterbury, Primate of all England and Metropolitan.
When it was over, the congregation applauded, and this seemed to surprise Dr. Runcie. For a moment he looked bewildered, even awestruck, as if the magnitude of his office and his task had finally struck him. Then, in the sunshine again, he did a sort of archiepiscopal walkabout. As one rural dean said to another, well worth postponing a budget for, isn't it? Anthony Carthew, ITN, at Canterbury.
Dr. Runcie mentioned in his speech this afternoon his great sorrow at the assassination of the Roman Catholic Archbishop of San Salvador, Oscar Romero, who was murdered just as he stepped into a chapel to take a service. A gang opened fire with machine guns as the congregation, including several nuns, crouched in terror. Archbishop Romero was a fighter for human rights and had spoken out against left and right-wing extremists. British MPs last year nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize. San Salvador 2 weeks ago, Archbishop Oscar Arnulfo Romero is preaching one of his sermons. Usually broadcast by El Salvador's Catholic radio station, they've earned Archbishop Romero many enemies. He tells his audience that right-wing extremists are trying to kill him. Although it's still not sure who killed the Archbishop today, his message 2 weeks ago was prophetic. 1 week later, the Archbishop made another impassioned plea for an end to violence at the funeral of the Secretary General of the left-wing Democratic Party and his wife. Both had been savagely murdered. At every opportunity, the Archbishop accused El Salvador's ruling civilian military junta of failing to act decisively enough to cure his country's injustices. Leftists came to see him as a most powerful spokesman for social justice. Archbishop Romero leaves behind the kind of violence seen in San Salvador last year, when National Guardsmen mowed down hundreds of students demonstrating against the government. Now, a significant voice against his country's injustices has been stilled, and ironically, by an assassin's bullet. Police in the Irish Republic have surrounded a house where a wanted IRA man is holding a family hostage. The man, Bernard McGinn, claims to have a hand grenade. He's taking refuge in a house at Dundalk, 6 miles from the border with Northern Ireland. McGinn has been on the run since last year, after he was given a 10-year jail sentence for possessing explosives. He disappeared while on bail. The number of people out of work in Britain this month has fallen slightly. Unemployment went down by just over 11,000 to nearly 1,478,000. But the drop between February and March is usually 3 times that amount, and there are also fewer than usual vacancies at this time of the year. Thousands of farmers closed the border between France and Germany at Strasbourg today to try to win higher prices from the common market. The farmers are lobbying the European Parliament, which has to approve any package of increased prices.
Most people in Britain probably regard the common market's agricultural policy as a disaster, except the farmers who benefit from it. And that's the point. On this side of the channel, there are many more farmers who do very well out of the CAP. And this demonstration was meant to put the squeeze on the European Parliament, who can either vote for a proposed 7.9% increase in farm prices or something much smaller. In fact, by continental standards, this was not a very big turnout, about 5,000 farmers in all, which might suggest to the German government facing elections this year or the French president facing an election next year that they can afford to be tougher with the farmers than they have been. What the farmers lacked in numbers, though, they made up for in cunning. 100 of them drove their tractors out of Strasbourg towards the German border, which happens to be the River Rhine. Halfway across the bridge which joins the two countries, the farmers, with, it must be said, the full cooperation of the French and German authorities, came to a halt, switched off, and got out. The result was that a section of the international border between France and Germany was closed for several hours, so that one common market pressure group could make its point. Michael Brunson, ITN, Strasbourg.
Dockers in Southampton have refused to go on strike in sympathy with the 9,000 dock workers on strike in Merseyside. They voted against a national dock strike called by the Merseyside men after the suspension of 100 dockers for refusing to load steel for export. The cargo was blacked in support of the steel workers' strike. The city has been quiet today, just before the budget. The Financial Times index closed at 430.3. That's up 3.1 points on yesterday. But the pound has risen, closing against the dollar at $2.1905, a rise of 75 points. Detectives investigating the great Bullion robbery have found the trailer which was hijacked yesterday, but there was no sign of the £4 million worth of silver ingots it was carrying. The trailer was discovered abandoned at Woodford Green in Essex, not far from the scene of the robbery.
The police also found this Alpine saloon in which two guards were following the Bullion container. They were bundled into a van, but so far the police haven't found that. The tractor unit that was used to pull the 10 tons of silver bullion was abandoned in Wanstead Flats, about 6 miles from the scene of the robbery. The haul consisted of 321 silver ingots, each with their own giveaway markings, so it's likely the robbers will melt the bars down. But how much would the scrap silver then be worth?
Well, obviously less than the value which has been quoted in the press today. And it depends on what basis that value was formed. But I would think about 50% or perhaps a little bit more than the market value at the time.
The bullion was being shipped by the London firm Jepson Heaton and was heading for Tilbury docks. But tonight, police are circulating details of the ingots' identifying marks to sea and airports throughout the UK. John Underwood, ITN, Essex.
In Rhodesia, 3 children were killed and 19 other people injured when a grenade exploded among a crowd at a political meeting. The incident in a township on the outskirts of Salisbury is the worst act of political violence since the election. New Yorkers are voting now in their presidential primaries, and it could be the swan song for Senator Edward Kennedy. If he loses this one to President Carter, most people think there's no way he could get the Democratic nomination.
Senator Kennedy spent the last hours of his campaign among New York's Jewish voters. Jews comprise around 30% of the state's Democrats, and a strong Jewish protest vote against President Carter's Israeli policies represents the senator's best, if remote, hope of winning here. On a radio chat show hosted by a rabbi at a crowded synagogue, and at meetings with Hasidic Jews in Brooklyn, Mr. Kennedy attacked the mix-up over the American United Nations vote on Israeli settlements.
I personally believe that the mistake was not made just in not reading the document, which I have here, a one-page document, the first time. It was made because I don't believe that the President of the United States read it a second time.
Mr. Kennedy still retains the affection of many of New York's blacks and other minorities who support his liberal stand on social issues. Norman Rees, ITN, in New York.
A young Merseyside man has described how he saw 2 policemen kicking and beating labourer Jimmy Kelly. Francis Keegan was giving evidence on the second day of the inquest on Mr. Kelly, who died in police custody after being arrested at the end of an evening's drinking.
Mr. Keegan, a 20-year-old labourer, has spent most of the day here giving his story. His flat is on the 13th floor of a block directly overlooking the waste ground where Mr. Kelly and the police had their confrontation. Mr. Keegan described to the court a violent attack on Mr. Kelly by 2 police officers. A few minutes earlier, he says he heard a man singing on the piece of waste ground below his window. After the police arrived, he saw them moving Mr. Kelly towards their car and saw Mr. Kelly double up after a sharp movement from one of the officers. When he looked again, Mr. Kelly was on the ground and he was being kicked and beaten by the 2 policemen. One of them was leaning over Mr. Kelly, and as his arm moved rhythmically up and down, there was a sound just like two pieces of wood being knocked together. The next thing he noticed was Mr. Kelly still lying on the ground while the officers appeared to be moving him around with their feet. A blue police van arrived, and Mr. Kelly, who appeared to be unconscious, was lifted into the back of that van, which then drove off. Well, all afternoon, the various counsel here have been questioning Mr. Keegan very closely about that story. The inquest continues tomorrow. Ken Rees, ITN, Liverpool.
Two of tonight's soccer matches are off, both in the Scottish Second Division, Alloa against East Stirlingshire and Brecon against Forfar. And the main points of the news again. The British Olympic Association have decided definitely to go to Moscow to the Olympics. The decision was supported by 15 national sports federations. And all this happened on a day when Prince Philip warned sporting bodies to be wary of governments. And the Most Reverend Robert Runcie has been enthroned as the 102nd Archbishop of Canterbury. And that's the news so far this Tuesday evening on 5:45. Goodbye.